As I told you at the beginning of the show today, we have a great guest joining us. In fact, we've talked about him on this show before, and today we have the great pleasure of having him join us by phone. I'll tell you briefly, introduce you to him. His name is Robert Epstein, Dr. Robert Epstein, and he is someone whose name you might recognize because he was the individual testifying in the United States Senate in an exchange back and forth with Senator Cruz on the subject of to what degree and how Google and other social media can orchestrate or manipulate the outcome of elections. But before we bring him on, I'll tell you other things about him. He is an American psychologist, a professor, author, journalist, has a PhD in psychology from Harvard University. He's been a commentator all over the place, National Public Radio, Voice of America, and even Disney Online. He's a writer, but the reason that many Americans became aware of him is because of what he learned and discovered during the 2016 elections concerning the ability of Google to manipulate people's thought about elections. So I believe we have Dr. Robert Epstein available. Hello, sir.
Hi there.
Dr. Epstein, I just want to, first of all, I mentioned to you before we started today, many people comment. In fact, I believe I played this segment on my show before of your testimony in front of in the United States Senate, in front of the Senate Judiciary Subcommittee on the Constitution in July of 2019. But I want to have you start by just explaining to our listeners what you discovered about the ability of Google to manipulate the views and opinions of voters that actually may have impacted the election of 2016. Tell us all about it.
Well, sure. There's two kinds of activities that I've engaged in that really tell the story of the power that Google and some other companies have to shift opinions and votes on a massive scale. So one part of what I've done has to do with controlled experiments I've been conducting since early 2013. So that's a long time now. And these experiments show that if one candidate is favored in search results, and people can't see that. I mean, you can't look at a bunch of search results and tell and see that they favor one candidate over another. You'd have to click on all the search results and look at the web pages, and then you'd have to kind of compare the web pages. You know, people don't do that, obviously. But the point is, if indeed one candidate is favored, people trust those high-ranking search results so much because they're coming from Google and because they're generated by a computer, so they must be objective, that whichever candidate is favored ends up shifting the opinions and the voting preferences, not of everyone, but of the undecided voters. And of course, the undecided voters in close elections, they decide who wins. That's why so much money pours into the so-called swing states in the months and weeks leading up to an election. The point is that search results alone, biased search results, can easily shift 20% or more of undecided voters up to 80% in some demographic groups. And that's after one search. So, you know, Google is, if they're hitting people with biased search results over and over, multiple times a day for many weeks, obviously they can have an enormous impact on the outcome of an election. I calculated that as of 2015, because a lot of elections are very close, Google's search algorithm was determining the outcomes of upwards of 25% of the elections in the world. And I'm sure that percentage is higher now. But there's a second kind of thing I've done as well, and that is to measure directly the bias in the search results that Google, Bing, and Yahoo were showing people both in the 2016 election and the 2018 election. So I set up the first ever monitoring systems. They're called passive monitoring systems because no one knows that they're running and Google can't see them. And those systems are kind of like the Nielsen ratings. You know, the Nielsen company has families and their identities are secret, and Nielsen has some special equipment in their homes that allows Nielsen to track, their television watching. And I developed similar kinds of technology that allowed us to basically look over the shoulders of a diverse group of American voters in 2016 and 2018 and see what Google, Bing, and Yahoo were showing people. And we found in both of those elections very strong liberal bias. And I am pretty much a liberal, and I like liberals. My whole family they're all liberals. But that bias was enough to have shifted in 2016 between 2.6 and 10.4 million votes to Hillary Clinton, whom I supported, without people knowing and without leaving a paper trail for authorities to trace. In 2018, that bias that we measured, if that had been present nationwide, that would have shifted upwards of 78.2 million votes to Democrats. That would have been spread across hundreds of elections, but still, again, this is occurring without people's knowledge and without leaving a paper trail. This is an extremely dangerous kind of power that these companies have. It's basically subliminal influence occurring on a massive scale.
That's interesting to use the word subliminal. That is so funny because when you were speaking, I was thinking about that, how people who are impacted by this don't know that it's happening. They don't realize. They think they're, as you said a few minutes ago, when people search on Google and other places, the assumption, unless you're familiar with your research or generally speaking with the conduct of some of the social media companies, you assume you asked it a question and you just got straight answers. And so, again, I want to be clear on a couple of things because the numbers are kind of amazing that you were just saying. I believe I was taking notes correctly, but in the 2016 presidential election, this bias on the part of Google, and this is in response to search result inquiries, may have shifted between 2.6 to 10.4 million votes toward Hillary. That's simply staggering. Okay, and these are distributed geographically, or they're mainly is Google operating in this way mainly in swing states, in places where they really could change things?
Well, in 2016, we had 95, we call them field agents in 24 states. We weren't singling out swing states exactly, but we were concerned to see whether that bias was occurring maybe just in blue states and not in red states. In fact, it was occurring in both blue and red states. So there was a pro-Hillary bias in all 10 search positions on the first page of Google search results in both blue and red states, and no such bias occurred on Bing or Yahoo. It was just Google. And of course, Google is all that counts since more than 90% of search is done on Google, and the next biggest search engine, Bing, only draws about 2% of search.
Is that right? I was actually going to ask you, Bing is the one I've heard people say, well, if you're upset about Google being so biased, go with Bing, but it's not particularly impactful if it's only 2%. So do the people who work at Google or the representatives of Google, when they became aware of your research, do they acknowledge that this exists, or do they refute everything you're saying?
Well, the official statements from the company always simply refute over and over again all of the various public statements I've made and the publications, that I've published and so on. They just keep denying. They just deny over and over again. But at this point, we have another source of evidence beyond my own research, and that is we have whistleblowers, we have leaks of emails, we have leaks of documents and leaks of videos, and all of those simply confirm what I have been warning people about since 2012 in one way or another. And all of these leaks and the whistleblowers are confirming what I have been saying. I'll just give you a quick example. In 2016, I published a very long investigative piece for U.S. News and World Report, and it was called The New Censorship. And it was about 9 of Google's blacklists, because that's one of the ways that Google controls opinion is by censoring, that is suppressing content. They suppress content that they don't like, period. And a lot of that is, in fact, conservative content. They sometimes suppress progressive and socialist content as well. You know, they do whatever they want to do. But the point is, I wrote this long article back then about 9 of Google's blacklists. I had never seen them, and Google never acknowledged having such things. When I testified before Congress last summer, right before me, a representative of Google testified, and he was asked under oath by one of our senators, does Google have blacklists? And he said under oath, no, Senator, we do not. Now, the fact is, a few months later, Zach Voorhees, who had been at Google as a senior software engineer for 8.5 years, walked out of Google. This was a few months after that hearing, walked out of Google with 950 pages of documents and a video. And among those documents were 2 of Google's blacklists, and they were actually called blacklists. Now that's just silly. I mean, they should have called them something else. But the point is, I was stunned. I mean, here was confirmation. Undeniable. I mean, confirmation of what I've been warning about for years. So point is, at this point we have at least 3 sources of evidence. We have my experiments now, which have involved now tens of thousands of people in multiple countries, involving 4 national elections or 5 national elections, I think, at this point. And we have my monitoring projects from 2016 and 2018, and we also now have the whistleblowers' documents and videos from Google itself.
So when you were testifying in the United States Senate and you had that famous exchange with Ted Cruz, who I thought was entertaining because he actually asked, and just to confirm for everyone, you are a Hillary Clinton supporter, and you said, yes, I am. I mean, that was really, it gives so much validity, first of all, obviously, to what you've uncovered. And also, I want to commend your integrity, because I think that a lot of people, if they're very politically minded, in fact, many people I think on the left do recognize that the mainstream media is biased, Google's biased, but they kind of like the bias, so they just think, well, that's, hey, yay for us. We've got a little leg up there. So I really commend your integrity. But I want to ask you, so you're in testifying in front of Congress, was there some goal you were aware of that the Judiciary Committee or the Congress was looking at, a legislative goal to try to fix this problem, or was it just to expose it?
Well, that's a tricky matter. There are certainly individual members of Congress on both sides of the aisle who are very concerned about the almost obscene power now that big tech companies have to influence opinions, attitudes, beliefs, purchases, votes. So there are definitely some individual members of Congress who are deeply concerned and who are talking about that. Now, that's very different, of course, from introducing legislation that might make matters a bit better. There doesn't seem to be any prospect of that occurring. I had a 4-hour private dinner with Senator Cruz a month or so, or a couple of months, I guess, after that hearing. We had a fantastic discussion. The man is extremely smart, and I really enjoyed every minute of it. We didn't talk politics. We talked about technology. He gets it. I mean, he really understands what's going on here. But basically, the impression I get from all members of Congress with whom I've been communicating is that there just isn't going to be any legislation for a variety of reasons. As Tucker Carlson put it when I was on his show, the Republicans, generally speaking, don't like regulation, so there's a problem. And the Democrats are being helped by these companies, especially Google, not just with money, but with votes. I mean, how do you escape from this? It's like a puzzle box that has no solution. How do you get out of this puzzle box? It's
Yeah, I was going to say that one reason I'm so grateful you could join me today. One reason that we were able to connect was because we heard you, my husband and I heard you speak at a conference. And among the things that I understood you be talking about was some idea that you could potentially, you, Dr. Robert Epstein, and others with whom you work, you could monitor in the 2020 election cycle, which is now, impending, it's on us, at least monitor Google's conduct with the notion of at least sharing with America afterwards all the monitoring in place. Here's how much Google swayed this election. Am I remembering that correctly? That was the idea. And then but even that, even if you did it and you got tremendous proof that there just is an incredible and illicit bias in search results, I don't know what you still would, or anyone would still want Congress to do. I personally, I wish you could come up, not you, but people could come up with a solution that's an antitrust solution. I know many smarter people than I have talked about trying to look at an antitrust solution, but describe, if you would, what you would do if you had unlimited resources to try to fix this problem.
Well, first of all, there is no antitrust solution. I guarantee you that. I've been working with the attorneys general from multiple states since 2015, and that's what they're focusing on. That won't work. There really are no regulatory solutions, and in fact, not even any, legislative solutions to this problem. What will work is very aggressive monitoring. In other words, doing to these companies what they do to us. They're surveilling us and our children 24/7 in hundreds of different ways. Most people are unaware of how extensive the surveillance is. We can do the same to them. And so the concept for the 2020 monitoring project is actually far, far, far more ambitious than what you just described, because we're trying to develop the capability of monitoring what these companies are showing people, and even what they're telling people through personal assistants, such as Alexa and the Google Assistant and Siri. We are developing the capabilities of monitoring more than a dozen different kinds of very subtle, largely subliminal manipulations, because search results, that was my first discovery. I've made quite a number of other ones since then. In fact, I'm now devoting a lot of resources to studying what we're calling a YME, or the YouTube manipulation effect, which is probably more powerful than any of the other effects I've discovered over the years, because 70% of the videos people are watching now on YouTube around the world are suggested by Google's top secret Up Next algorithm. 70% of the videos people are watching are suggested by Google's algorithm. YouTube is part of Google. That means Google is taking people, millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people every day down rabbit holes.
Yep.
And imagine watching a whole sequence of videos that favor one candidate or favor one cause. Imagine the power you have to shift opinions. People have been radicalized by watching a sequence of YouTube videos. I mean, that we know for sure. The point is, the 2020 monitoring system, in theory, would not only be studying a very wide range of these manipulations, but we will be analyzing the data, a massive amount of data, as it is coming in, as we're collecting it, and we will, whenever we detect irregularities, bias, manipulations of any sort, we will report them, perhaps every single day in the months and weeks leading up to the election. We'll report them to the Federal Election Commission, to members of Congress, to the media, and we will get these companies to back off. We can stop them. I know how to do it, but there is a funding problem here, and the coronavirus has really gotten in the way. I mean, we were on the verge of having full funding just a few weeks ago, and everything at this point is on hold, or as someone told me recently, all the oxygen in Washington, D.C. is now being taken up by the coronavirus.
Well, speaking of coronavirus, we've been talking about Google's manipulation of search results that impact election outcomes, the 2016 presidential, many other elections. But Google could do the same thing in shaping public opinion about the danger of the coronavirus, how well it's being handled by the current administration. They can manipulate public thought on almost any topic. Is that correct?
Yes, Google is not only a threat to democracy around the world, it's also a threat to human autonomy. We've shown in controlled experiments that biased search results can shift people's opinions about just about anything. We've done it with attitudes on homosexuality, on fracking, and anything we've tried. We're able to produce these shifts as long as we're starting out with people who are undecided on a particular issue. And of course, Google knows who those people are. Google has histories on us. If you've been using the internet for 20 years, they have more than 3 million pages of information on you.
But
They know exactly
on each person.
On each person.
Oh my gosh.
3 million pages of information on each person, including me and including you.
Yeah.
And they know exactly who the undecided voters are. They know who's going to vote and who's not going to vote. In each swing state, they're not only doing targeting, they're targeting individuals. They know everything. They know more than people know about themselves. So the kind of targeting no other entity in the world, no other company, no government could possibly do. They're doing targeting at the individual level using subliminal methods that no one can detect and that do not leave a paper trail. The only way to stop them is with aggressive monitoring. Now, whether or not the funding will appear at this point, I don't know. And again, the coronavirus has just gotten in the way. It's really troubling.
Oh, it's very troubling. So one last question for you. This is fascinating. I so appreciate you're able to spend time with us today. So if you're an American citizen who realizes what Google is doing, besides, people can share this video and tell their friends, is there anything people can do? Because I do think that even people who are really politically engaged and taking the time to look things up on the internet and to understand an issue better or a candidate better, no one likes the feeling of being duped or played or manipulated. So is there anything, and this is a terribly open-ended question, but anything besides supporting your project and letting people know about the project you'd like to undertake, anything people can do to fight back against it?
Well, I'm so glad you mentioned support, because people can go to mygoogleresearch.com. That's mygoogleresearch.com, and they can learn more about my work, and they can support my research there through that link. The main thing at this point, I mean, as individuals, there's not too much we can do. There are ways to use the internet so you have more privacy, and I've written about that. I explain how to do that at a different link, which is my7simplesteps.com.
Is that 7 spelled out SEVEN?
Either way, it should get you to the correct article that I've written, which is about how you can most definitely increase your privacy. In fact, I begin the article by saying that I have not received a targeted ad on my computer or my mobile phone since 2014. So you can use the internet, a little differently if you want to protect your privacy and the privacy of your children. That's doable. But these larger issues of surveillance, massive surveillance, of censorship, and of course manipulation, those are tough for us as individuals to handle. And in my opinion, because tech moves so fast and has, of course, so much power to influence, our nation's leaders, I don't think that regulation or legislation is going to help us very much. I think we must set up very aggressive monitoring systems. Monitoring systems are tech. Tech can keep up with tech, you see? And I think these systems need to exist around the world, not just to protect us from Google, but from the next Google and the next one after that. In my mind, that is the ultimate solution to the problem. That's the ultimate protection that we can use to keep these companies in check. At the moment, at the moment, as far as I can tell, democracy is little more than an illusion because, in the 2020 election alone, Google and the gang will be able to shift easily 15 million votes to whichever candidate they choose, which means that President Trump, and I'm not a Trump supporter, which means that President Trump cannot possibly win. When you take into account the kind of individual targeting that Google can do, but in a way no one else possibly can, and the fact that 97% of their donations go to Democrats. Unless a monitoring system is running, which would make the election obviously much more fair, and would get these companies to back off, unless there is that kind of system running, President Trump cannot win re-election. It's literally statistically impossible. Now, although I'm not a Trump supporter, let me say that under Obama in his second term, Google took over Washington, D.C. And the investigations that were ongoing, antitrust investigations that were ongoing against Google, Obama shut them down literally within the first few weeks of his second term. By the end of his term, 6 federal agencies were being run by former Google executives. Now, since Trump has come into office, that's all changed. There are now multiple investigations ongoing against Google and other companies by the Federal Trade Commission, Department of Justice, attorneys general, various committees in Congress. Very, very aggressive investigations are in progress under Trump. The first thing that will happen when the Democrats basically sweep Washington, D.C., is that all of these investigations will be shut down, and Google and other companies will consolidate their power, and we might never, ever be able to challenge them.
Well, I am so glad for the kind of work you're able to do, the talent and skill and knowledge you bring to it so that you can share information like this. I encourage people, again, I want to ask you again, Dr. Epstein, that website they can go to read more of your research and also to support what you're doing. I would love to have more Americans feel invested, no matter what side of the aisle they're on, but feel invested in trying to insist on legitimacy and fairness and to the extent possible, lack of bias in Google. So the one website you said to read your research is mygoogleresearch.com. Okay, I love that. And then is that where they can go to support what you're doing also?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, love that. And Dr. Epstein, I appreciate what you're doing. Again, I commend your integrity. And I think everyone, to me, the sense of being played and manipulated and figuring out later, wait a minute, they just steered me down a path versus giving me the truth, should make many more people want to rise up and protest what's going on and support what you're doing. So, sir, thank you so much for joining me today.
It was my pleasure. Thank you very much for a very stimulating set of questions. I really enjoyed it.
Same to you, sir. Thank you so much. I enjoyed it too. And that, my friends, was Dr. Robert Epstein. And again, I encourage you, this is an amazingly important issue for Americans to understand, not just because of the 2020 elections, but even moving forward from that, what people think is true about a host of issues, what people think is true about candidates, elected officials, coronavirus, and immigration policy. If you're being manipulated and fed the answers that somebody else wants, you're really being deprived of your own right to research and understand and form your own opinion. So I urge you to support Dr. Epstein. And sir, again, thank you so much.
Very welcome. Thank you.